So today we will decipher the science of learning and we will learn effective ways of learning. So when we talk about learning, there are two kinds of learning that we talk about. One is the rote learning and the second is the understanding kind of learning. When we talk about rote learning, what it essentially means is a repetition of what you learned or read in the first instance. You keep on repeating something, but the problem with this kind of learning is it is short-lived. It is good for an examination or an interview that is due within a short course of time. But repetition learning or the rote learning generally does not have a long-term memory. The reason is in your brain, the neurons that are available get connected with this learning. But as soon as you learn something new, these neurons get confused and there is misfiring which leads to loss of this memory. Hence, repetitive learning or rote learning is not the best way of learning. The second way of learning, which is essentially the most effective way, is the understanding kind of learning. In understanding kind of learning, what you are essentially doing is you are grasping the concept. You are understanding the why, what, how of each and every statement or each and every line that you are reading or learning. When you practice this kind of learning, understanding that you try to understand the why, what and how of each and everything, over a period of time you develop this habit automatically and you don't have to stress upon yourself or you don't have to work hard to do this kind of learning. It automatically happens. Even if you're reading a newspaper, you're reading any book, this why, what, how automatically crops up and you try to understand, decipher something easily, break it down and then learn. This is essentially and very good for physics, parts of chemistry, for understanding few concepts of biology, for understanding physiology, lots and lots of for mathematics. This understanding kind of learning works pretty well. I should say it is one of the best ways of learning when you talk about the majority of the subjects. However, there are some things where there is no understanding. Like if I tell you, name the SAARC countries, the SAARC countries, name those countries. Or if I ask you who were the first 8 Mughal rulers of India, is there an understanding in that? Absolutely no. You cannot understand who were the 8 rulers of India, 8 Mughal rulers of India, first 8 Mughal rulers of India, or you cannot understand anything about SAARC countries, SAARC countries. So what do you do in that case? This leads to emergence of 2 new bifurcations out of this understanding kind of learning, which are essentially the photogenic memory or the photogenic learning and the emotional memory or the emotional learning. Now, what exactly is a photogenic memory? Photogenic memory is wherein you see something and then memorize or you visualize something. So for example, if I were to show you the history in terms of a video of the first 8 Mughal rulers of India, can you just imagine that how easy would it be for you to recall those 8 Mughal rulers once you've seen the video? Or if I were to say that I narrate a story to you about the first 8 Mughal rulers of India in terms of their appearance, if I talk about that Babur was a small man, he had moustache, he was very aggressive. If I talk about Shah Jahan, he built Taj Mahal. What essentially happens is, if I tell you this story, you have a visualization. You try to visualize something. Then I tell you the year in which they were existing. You try to visualize those numbers. When this happens, what is essentially happening is you are creating a photogenic memory. So either through a live video or you visualize a narration which creates a photogenic memory, which is essentially again a long-term memory. The second kind of memory is the emotional memory. In terms of emotional memory, there can be 2 kinds. One is automatic and the other is through mnemonics. When we talk about automatic memory, emotional memory, it's incidences or something that creates an impression in your brain, an emotional arousal in you, which is automatically registered. I'll give you a good example for this. Like when we had COVID for the past 2 years, Haven't you discussed with your friends and family that yesterday there were 16,000 positive patients? Someone would come up and say there were 16,289, and someone would just come up that I just saw 2 hours back it is 17,700 positive patients. How did this number come up? How does anyone remember this 17,000 figure? You never intended to learn the figure 17,000 or something, but it registered in your brain for a long term. Why? Because the news of the COVID cases rising up, the casualties, everything created an emotional impact in your brain. And when there is an emotional impact of anything, there is a long-term memory that is registered. I'll give you another example. Like most of you might have heard or know about the 2001 attack on United States of America. So if you talk about this, if I were to ask you where you were when you heard the news of this 11 September 2001 attack, there are chances that if you are socially and politically, or you have general knowledge, or you are more keen towards understanding the knowledge, gaining the knowledge around, you might remember where you were, what you were doing when this attack on United States of America happened. Why? Because this was such a shocking incident for everyone across the globe that this kind of something can also happen. When there is a shocking news, something like this, it registers in the emotional concept, emotional memory, and it registers as a permanent long-term memory. And even though you never intended to learn or remember what you were doing that day, you still remember what you were doing on 11 September 2001. So for most of you who could not relate to this, you can relate to any other incident that created an emotional impact in you, and I can assure you, I can bet on you that you might be remembering what you were doing, and in some cases you might even remember what you were wearing, in spite of the fact that you never intended to learn or remember any of those things. So this is the impact of an emotional memory. But that was happening automatically. You cannot create an emotional arousal for everything. But yes, there is a way. When you read text or something, if you can create some kind of an emotional association with the text, like if you're reading about the 8 Mughal rulers of India, you can sort of create an emotional that someone was that big an aura, someone had a very small aura, Shah Jahan was jailed by his own son Aurangzeb. So you will remember this because this creates again an emotional impact. So if you can relate emotionally, you can create a connection to whatever you are reading, writing or learning, it will create a long-term memory for you. Now the second is the easier way of emotional learning, which is the mnemonic. So for example, if I were to tell you the SAARC countries, what are the SAARC countries, you may not remember that. On a short-term basis, you may remember through rote learning, but you will forget it. So there's a mnemonic which says MBBS pain. So what MBBS pain says, it's MBBS is pain. You can just remember it that way. And then as soon as you say this, you will remember all the countries that are SAARC countries. So Myanmar, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India and Nepal. So see how easy it is. And I can bet that if you're seeing this video, you will never forget what are the SAARC countries. Why? Because I created an emotional association with SAARC countries with MBBS's pain. So I created an emotional connect. So next time someone asks you SAARC countries, you will not remember the countries, but you'll immediately remember MBBS's pain. So the mnemonics, if they can give a good emotional response, they are good mnemonics. The mnemonics which do not arouse an emotional response or does not create a memory in terms of emotion is not a good mnemonic. Then if I were to talk about the 8 Mughal rulers of India, the first 8 Mughal rulers, there's a mnemonic in India what we say bhaji sabji. So if you label these are 4 plus 4, 8 Mughal rulers of India, I've listed them down and you will immediately remember. The next time someone asks you what are the first 8 Mughal rulers, who were the first 8 Mughal rulers of India, you would remember easily bhaji sabji. So that's how mnemonics create an emotional memory or an emotional impact, and that's one of the best ways of learning. So friends, we deciphered the science of learning and how you can implement that. If you're a parent, you need to delve deep into this subject and encourage your child to do this kind of learning effectively. And if you're a student yourself who's seeing this video, you must understand, delve deep into what kind of learning you are doing and what kind of learning you can do to create a long-term impact. So I'll just summarize key takeaways. So there are two kinds of learning: rote learning and understanding learning. Understanding is the concepts, rote is repetition, short-term memory. However, when you understand the concepts, there is a long-term memory because the neurons are created and the new learning comes up as a connection to the already existing neurons. But everything cannot be understood. When something cannot be understood, you have two options: either create a photogenic memory or an emotional memory. Photogenic memory is either through visualization or an actual video absorption. An emotional memory can be through an emotional arousal through an incident that has happened, or you can relate emotionally to something that you're learning. Or the second kind of emotional learning is the mnemonics. Mnemonics basically create an emotional response to something that you want to learn. So friends, this is about deciphering the science of learning. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like this video, please like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to watch my next video. Thank you.